Please start.
Okay. So good evening, students. We started with hydrosphere. So we will continue with that particular topic of thing. I'll just share my screen. 1 second. Where is it now? Where did I put it now? So many things are there in this. Where did I put it? 1 second. Where is it? Oh, yamma. Where did I put it? I think it is here, this side, I think. Correct. It is coming like this now. Where did it go? It is coming like this now. 1 second. What is this now? What is happening, Shailaja? Something I did. How do I share my screen? Somewhere I went wrong, I think.
No, you have already shared the screen.
Acha, but that particular topic is not coming, no? Okay.
Yeah.
1 second.
Yeah, or before the class, you share it with me.
Can you see, children? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think all these we have done. Once again, we'll just go through the topics, what all we have done, because it is 1 week, no? So, so this is the hydrosphere. This is the definition you will be learning. That is combined mass of water found on, under, and above the surface of the earth. Can anyone tell me what is on, under, and above? What is the examples you can give for that?
Ma'am, groundwater and water due to evaporation and river water.
Very good. That means the water bodies which are present on the surface, the underground water, and the water which is escaping in the form of evaporation are all called as the hydrosphere. Okay. Then we have the hydrological cycle. One line when we say what is hydrological cycle is that where the water gets evaporated and reaches to the atmosphere and again comes back to the earth in the form of various forms of precipitation. What are the various forms of precipitation?
Rain, fog, dew.
Very good. Rain, snow, fog, mist sheet also. All these are the various forms of precipitation. Okay. Then the importance of hydrosphere, as I said that Earth is the only planet which has water and no other planets have water surface. So that is very important for us. It consists of all bodies of water and Earth contains 97% of water. Sorry, oceans contain 97% of water in the atmosphere. So these are all the importance. Helps to maintain hydrological cycle, good means of transport of water, plays a vital role in the Earth's climate. You all know that if there is no rain, what will happen? If more rain is also, what will happen? All these are the consequences we talk about. Okay, all these we have done. We were talking about the ocean floors, continental shelf, continental slope, deep sea plain, and oceanic deeps. Remember, these are the 4 major divisions which we have in the ocean floors. Then we were talking about the ocean currents. The ocean currents also have a lot of impact on the formation. If it is a cold current, it will cause the climate will become very cold. If it is a warm cold current, then it will always try to moderate the climatic conditions. So factors which all impact the ocean current formations are planetary winds, temperatures, salinity, Earth's rotation, landmass, local climate, precipitation, desert formation, moderating effect. Then we also talked about the tropical cyclones also. Okay. Now, did I complete all this or should I go through this? Because I am not able to remember whether, did I do all this, ma? I remember Coriolis forces, I said. What is Ferrel's law? Can anyone tell me? What will happen to the wind?
It's about the hot winds blows towards the center and cold winds towards the poles.
No. I'm asking about the Farrell's law. According to the Farrell's law and Coriolis effect, what happens?
In northern hemisphere, the winds are deflected to right.
Very good.
South, deflected to left.
Excellent. So that's what I said. This is a general law which you have to remember. Farrell's law, right in the northern hemisphere, left in the southern hemisphere. Just keep it in your mind. That's all. So the movement of the ocean currents in the northern hemisphere is clockwise. Remember, in MCQs, they will ask you how is the direction of the wind means. In the northern hemisphere, it is clockwise, and in the southern hemisphere, it is anti-clockwise because of the deflection of the winds as such. What is landmass is that a landmass obstructs the direction of the flow of ocean current and divides the ocean current to flow in a different direction. Suppose if the ocean current is obstructed by a landmass, it can be a plain, plateau, or a mountain, for example, then the ocean current gets deflected and divides into different direction. Okay, so local climate, warm and cold currents affect the local climate of a region. Like I told you that the climatic conditions will change depending upon the existing of warm and cold currents, especially the local climatic conditions. Local climatic condition means one area. Like for example, if you're in Hyderabad, it is Hyderabad. If you're in Bangalore, it is Bangalore. Or if you're in Visakhapatnam, it is Visakhapatnam. One particular area, it will get affected as such. Okay, then you have precipitation. Warm currents flow along the eastern coast of the continents, resulting in warm and rainy climates, while cold currents flow along the western coast of the continents. One more important thing. Warm currents always flow on the eastern coast of the continents, whereas cold currents always flow on the west coast of the continents. This also you have to remember. The directions are very, very important. When you are learning geography, be very specific. North, south, east, west, northeast, and southeast. All these directions you should be able to know very clearly. That means depending upon the direction of the winds, how they move, the same way it happens. So all this is depending upon two important motions of the earth. What are the two motions of the earth?
Rotation and revolution.
Excellent. Rotation and revolution we talk about. So that is a basic thing when we say about geography. Deserts formation is that cold ocean currents have a direct effect on desert formation in west coast regions of the tropical and the subtropical continents. I gave you this also. Peru current, also called Humboldt current, is a cold water current of the Southeast Pacific Ocean and a primary reason for the aridity of the Atacama Desert. What do you mean by aridity? That means the dryness to the core. It is the most driest desert of the world. That means you don't find water anywhere. It is only very heat, lots of heat is generated. Why it happened? It is because of the cold water current, and because of which there is dryness over there. Moderating effect is that they are responsible for moderate temperatures at the coast. That means they can have extreme climatic conditions and also moderating. What is a moderate climate? How do you explain a moderate climate?
Ma'am, it will be both dry and wet type of climate, ma'am.
Yes, that means you don't find any extremes as such. It will be moderate means which is bearable. That means summer also bearable, rainy season is bearable, winter also is bearable. This type of moderating climate usually found in the coastal areas only because of the influence of the oceans present there. If there is a water body, for example, already this also I have explained long back. When you say that why the coastal areas are, for example, if you take Mumbai, Calcutta, and Chennai, if you take for example, all these three places will record only 35 degrees and 36 degrees in summer season. Why do they record such less temperatures when the entire country is facing 40 degrees, 41 degrees and 45 degrees? What is the reason for that?
Water heats and cools quickly.
Very good. Very good. That means the water, by the time it gets heated up, okay, it will be night and it starts becoming cold during the night time. That is the reason why you have moderating climatic conditions. Whereas the interior regions have very high climatic conditions because there is no water body present over there. So sometimes these ocean currents are also responsible for moderating the temperatures at the coast. That is what I'm telling you. All the coastal areas have moderating effect as such. Tropical cyclones is that they pile up warm waters in tropics, and this warm water is a major force behind the tropical cyclones. It is a mixing of the warm and the cold water which will result in a spiraling effect. That is what we call it as the cyclone as such. Am I clear till here? Yeah? Yeah. Now coming to the ocean deposits. Ocean deposits usually consist of unconsolidated sediments which can come from various sources and are deposited at the ocean floor. That means they consist of so many minerals as such, and according to the characteristics of the ocean depth, ocean deposits can be classified as pelagic deposits and terrigenous deposits. So remember these two words. The ocean deposits are classified into two, which is called as pelagic deposits and terrigenous deposits. Most important types of ocean deposits are terrigenous and pelagic. Now, let us see. They are again divided into, the terrigenous deposits are those which are found on the continental shelves and slopes and mainly consist of the rock material derived because of the wear and tear. That means you find on the slopes, that means on the near the surface you find the terrigenous deposits. And how are they formed? They mainly consist of the rock material which is derived because of the wear and the tear. Wear and the tear means there is something called as weathering. This is a very important process in geographical terms when you talk about weathering and denudation. What is weathering and what is denudation? Did you hear these two terms or no?
Yes, ma'am.
What is weathering?
Process where the rocks,
They get degenerated.
They get degenerated.
Degenerated. How do they get degenerated?
Ma'am, if they roll from the higher surface or something.
No. Now, how does the process occur is that I'll tell you. During the summer season, because of the heat,
They expand.
Expand. During the summer season, what will happen? When they expand, cracks will occur. Okay. When the rocks are expanding, cracks will occur. So during the rainy season, the water percolates or gets deposited in the cracks. When they occur like that, this particular rocks will break down into small pebbles, but this will take some millions of years. This is what is called as weathering and denudation. Weathering is the rocks breaking down into small pebbles or stones, and in the process these particular rocks will flow down and get concentrated in different places or transported to different places, which you call it as weathering and denudation. This is what is called as terrigenous deposits, which are formed because of the wear and the tear. Wear and the tear is nothing but weathering and denudation. Clear? Am I clear with that explanation? Yeah. Now, the pelagic deposits are those which are found over deep sea plains and the deep. That means the terrigenous deposits are found on the surface of the earth, and pelagic are found very deep in the sea. These deposits mainly consist of organic remains of plants and animals, but this distinction between the two types of deposits is not absolute. For instance, the terrigenous deposits may not always consist of the fragmented raw material and may be carried deep into the sea also. Also, the pelagic deposits may not always consist of the plant and animal remains and may be extended up to continental slopes. So there is no hard and fast rule that pelagic deposits will be found here only or they are found here only. They can be found here also. They can be found. That means a terrigenous deposit will consist of the rocks as well as the decaying of the plant and the animals. In the same way, the pelagic deposits also can have both of them. So terrigenous and pelagic deposits are those deposits which consist of the fragmented rock material as well as the decay of the plant and the animals or the organic remains of plants and animals. Am I clear with that? So they can be found in the continental slope. They can be found in the deep sea plain also. Am I clear with that? Yeah. The greater part of the deposits in the continental shelf and slopes is derived from the rock material. They are led by disintegration and decomposition by the agents of weathering and carried to the sea by the agents of erosion such as running water, wind, and etc. These are the important things. That means they are derived from the rock material, and they are, how are they formed, or how is the rock material formed here? Is that it is because of the weathering process. And once the weathering is done, that means when the great rocks broke into small pebbles, they are carried by agents of erosion. What are the agents of erosion? It can be water, it can be snow, or it can be wind also, by which they get transported to different places. The process and extent of disintegration depends on the nature of the rock material, climate, and the time taken. So how does the disintegration, how far it occurs is that, see, when you talk about the rock cycle, I don't know, in your 7th class or 6th class, you must have this rock cycle. What is rock cycle is that some of the rocks, they get disintegrated very fast. Some of the rocks will take longer period of time. Why does it happen is that it is because of the rock material. What are they composed of? What are the properties and what are the characteristics of the rock is one factor. Second factor is what is the climate, whether it is a very hot climate, whether it is a very cold climate, or whether it is a moderate climate, depending upon that. Suppose if I say that if the temperature is very high, 45 degrees and 46 degrees, the weathering takes place a lot. That means the rock will get expand very fast. And also the time taken. As I said, that the weathering and the denudation will take place over millions of years. It doesn't happen in one day. It doesn't happen in 2 days. It happens millions of years ago. So the process and extent of disintegration, how far the rocks have been disintegrated, will depend upon the nature of the rock material, of what it is made of, what are the characteristics or what are the features. Second thing is what is the climatic condition prevailing over there and what is the time taken. Okay, the larger particles of the terrigenous deposits are found near the shore and the finer ones are carried deeper. The extent to which they are carried outwards depends on size of rock. Same thing again, once again. On the basis of size of particles, the terrigenous deposits again classified into mud, sand, and gravel. Mud refers to the finest particles which comprise the minute particles of rock forming minerals, principally quartz. Now, quartz is a mineral which is found in the oceans only. This is one of the mineral that can be available, which is the finest particle as such. Murray has classified this. He is a geographer, has classified the mud deposits into blue, green, and red types based on the color of the constituents. Sand refers to the coarser particles, while gravel has even bigger particles also. So once again, when we go back, terrigenous deposits is that we are talking about the size of the particles. They are classified into 3: mud, sand, and gravel. Mud refers to the finest particles, and what is the mineral that is formed here is the quartz. Quartz is considered to be one of the important minerals which are used in the industries as such. Murray is a geographer who has classified these mud deposits into blue, green, and red types. That means the quartz mineral can occur in blue color, green color, as well as the red color also. Then you have the volcanic products in the volcanic regions. What is a volcano? How many types of volcanoes are there? Which countries have more volcanoes? Any idea? Italy? Yes, ma'am. Which countries have volcanoes?
Ma'am, Japan.
Very good. And Italy.
Indonesia.
Indonesia, Italy, Japan. These are all the countries which have mostly volcanoes, and they even erupt also. That means in a volcanic type, you have 3 types of volcanoes. What are the 3 types of volcanoes?
Active and
Ma'am,
dormant.
active volcanoes.
Very good.
And passive volcanoes. And
Instead
another
of
one
saying
is
passive, you can say that sleeping volcanoes and dormant volcanoes. That means some volcanoes do not erupt at all. Okay, active is that always there will be throwing up the ash, and they will be bringing about. So these volcanic regions, wherever you have these volcanics, the deposits, the continental shelf and the slope consist of volcanism, which are subject to chemical and mechanical weathering and are carried to the ocean by actions of running water and wind. We all know that when a volcano erupts, you get a lot of, what is it called as, whatever liquid that comes out is called as?
Lava.
Very good. It is called as a lava. It is not larva. LARVA is biology. LAVA is your lava, which is coming out from the volcano. So these are subjected to chemical and mechanical weathering. That means the lava flows out, it gets solidified. After that, they will be subjected to mechanical weathering, and then they are carried to the ocean by actions of running water and wind. That means this lava in course of time will be carried by the agents of erosion. It can be running water, it can be wind also. Now, the volcanic deposits differ from the ordinary terrigenous deposit. That is, they are made of pyroclastic volcanic products and lava rather than quartz. So in that we talked about mud. Here we are talking about the lava, which is formed out of lava. Organic products such deposits consist of shells and skeletons of various plants and animals that live and grow on the slope and they differ from the ordinary terrigenous deposits in the sense that they consist of calcium carbonate only. That means to a certain extent, the ocean will consist of certain minerals which are very, very important. But as I said that it is not possible to utilize these resources. What is the reason why we can't use all these resources properly which are found in the oceans? Any answers? Why we can't use the minerals which are found in the oceans?
Because it will take a lot of money to refine from them.
Very good. One is that extraction is impossible. It is very difficult to extract those minerals from that. Second one is your financial problems. You should also have the technology also. And we do not know the quality. See, when you are taking a mineral from the earth, what are the things? There is something called as economic viability of the minerals. What is an economic viability of the mineral is that when a country tries to extract a mineral, they see three things in that. One is that what is the quantity, what is the quality of the mineral, and also what is the cost that you are going to incur in order to extract that. That means if it is in the deepest layers of the earth, you have to use a lot of technology, lot of money. And after that, what is the quality and quantity? Now, what is quality of a mineral is that there is something called as industrial minerals, then you have domestic minerals, then you also have something called as normal minerals. Usually you call it as commercial use. What is commercial use is that the finest minerals are utilized in industries. You cannot use a substandard mineral over there. So all these are certain things that we take when we talk about minerals, which is called as economic viability. So here when we are talking about taking the minerals from the oceans, like how you said Vikram just now, it is very difficult. You have to invest a lot of money. You should have the proper technology. And also after taking that, is that mineral okay or not is also very difficult for us. Okay. Pelagic deposits are also covering 75% of the seafloor. This is because except for fine volcanic ash, little tennis, okay. The pelagic deposits consist of both organic and inorganic material also. Now let us see what is organic material. This is in the form of a kind of liquid mud called ooze, which contains shells and skeletons of various marine organisms. The ooze is said to be calcareous when the shell is made of calcium carbonate. Calcareous is which consists of a lot of salt content as well as rocky structure also. So organic material is that it is a liquid mud which is called as the ooze. What is a liquid mud? When rain falls, you all know that how the mud becomes when you put water or something like that, that bubbles which come into the mud, that is what you call it as wood, which is called as the organic material. The calcareous ooze may be either what is it? Pteropod ooze or Globigerina ooze. Most parts of the Indian and Atlantic Oceans have calcareous ooze as the deposit. So where do you find this ooze is mainly in the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. This you have to remember. Liquid form of the mud is called as ooze, which is called as a calcareous when the shell is made of calcium carbonate. It should be made of calcium carbonate, and mostly this calcareous ooze is found in Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. When the shell is made of silica, the ooze is said to be siliceous ooze, which can either be drawn, it can either the diatom type, whatever it is. The southern fringes of the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans have the siliceous type of ooze. So you have to remember, under organic material, you have something called as liquid mud called the ooze. Okay, and when the shell is said to be, or the ooze is said to be calcareous when the shell is made up of calcium carbonate. Where do you find the calcareous ooze? I said in the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. Then if the shell is made of silica, then the ooze is called as siliceous ooze, which is also found in the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. Then you have the inorganic material. This is in the form of red clay, which is of volcanic origin, and the chief constituents of red clay are silicon or aluminum dioxide, while other constituents include iron, manganese, phosphorus, and radium. The red clay is the most widely spread pelagic deposit and covers 38% of the sea floor, and the red clay covers more than half of the Pacific floor. So in the inorganic material, you have the red clay, which will be consisting of various constituents like silicon and aluminum dioxide, and also iron, manganese, and phosphorus. It is mostly, that means, which is the major part of the pelagic deposits is the red clay, and it is mostly found in the Pacific Ocean. So all these statistics you should know. Where do you find what? Okay, I'll ask you one question. Where do you find the siliceous ooze? Which ocean? Yes. Where do you find siliceous ooze? Come on, children. Just now I said. Why are all so quiet? Where do you find the siliceous ooze? I said. Vikram.
Ma'am, because of power cut.
In the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans, they have the siliceous type of the ooze. Then you have the red clay, which is found in the Pacific Ocean. Then countries around the world need metals and minerals to satisfy the demands for technology and electronics. The ocean beds contain critical energy sources like petroleum and gas. You all know that Krishna Godavari basin. Then in Gujarat you have. Then raw materials, sand, gravel, phosphorite, corals, and other biogenic carbonates, heavy metal ores which can fulfill the demands. You know what are corals, which are found mostly in the Lakshadweep and Andaman Islands as such. Direct extraction of resources is limited to salt, magnesium, placer, gold, tin, titanium, and diamonds, and fresh water. So what do you extract from the oceans is salt, mainly magnesium. Then you have placer gold deposits, tin, titanium, and diamonds. These are the only things which you can directly extract from the oceans. Ferromanganese, manganese nodules, and which occur in deep ocean settings from the Arctic and Antarctic could be important sources of these metals and the minerals. That means these are also found, but to what extent you can extract them is a question mark. Salt or sodium chloride occurs in seawater at a concentration of about 3% and hence constitutes more than 80% of the dissolved chemical elements in the seawater. That is the reason why the ocean water is salty. Okay, because the concentration of salt and sodium chloride is at a concentration of about 3% and hence constitutes more than 80% of the dissolved chemical elements in the seawater. Potassium occurs in vast quantities in seawater, but its average concentration is only this much and is generally too low to permit direct economic extraction. As I told you that a mineral should be economically viable. So though you have potassium, it is occurring at a very low percentage. That is the reason why you cannot directly extract. Magnesium dissolved in seawater is the only metal directly extracted from the seawater. So what all you can extract? Salt you can extract, magnesium also you can extract. Presently, 60% of the magnesium metal and many of the magnesium salts produced in the United States are extracted from the seawater. So magnesium and also magnesium metal is extracted from the seawater. The ocean basins constitute the ultimate depositional site of sediments eroded from the land, and beaches represent the largest residual deposits of the sand. Along the beaches and nearshore sediments are extracted, used in construction. They are generally considered too valuable as recreational areas to permit removal for construction purposes. You have the salt, you have the sand over there. The sand is very finest, but you cannot take that sand and use for construction because you have to protect your coastal areas also. That is the reason why you cannot take the sand which is present over there. Limestones are forming extensively in the tropical by biological organisms ranging from that. There is little exploitation of the modern limestone as they are forming in the oceans. As I told you that it is not possible to extract from the oceans. Okay. Then the deep ocean floor contains extremely large quantities of nodules ranging from centimeters to decimeters in diameter. Although commonly called manganese nodules, they generally contain more iron than manganese, but do constitute the largest known of manganese. Even manganese nodules also can be taken, but this is also restricted, but not much they can take. Complex organic and inorganic processes constantly precipitate phosphate-rich crust and granules in shallow marine environments, and these are representing future potential reserves if land-based deposits become exhausted. That means these are all called as a reserve and a stock. Now in geography, you have something called as reserve and stock. Can anyone tell me what is a reserve and what is a stock? When you talk about the classification of the resources, we have this term called as reserve and stock. Can anyone tell me, anyone in 10th class here who are doing their 10th? CBSE 10th? Say children fast. It is not clear. What is a reserve and stock is that we know that resource is existing. We have the technology, we have the finance, but we are not using it because we are saving it for the future. Once the land deposits get exhausted, then we will try to take the minerals from the ocean. So this is one where you talk about phosphate rich crust and granules in shallow marine environments. These are of the onshore deposits being mined in several parts of the world, and these are the potential reserves which can be used in the future as such. Submarine investigations have revealed that rich deposits of zinc and copper, silver, gold, lead are forming at the sites of hot hydrothermal emanations commonly called as a black smoker. So these are submarine investigations. Means you all know about submarines? All know submarines?
Yes, ma'am.
Then these are for underwater vehicles.
Yes, very good. See, the submarine investigations have said that the deposits are consisting of zinc and copper, very, very important minerals, and lead, silver, gold. You all know that these are all called as the precious metals. Yeah, so these are all forming at the sites of hot hydrothermal emanations, which are called as black smokers. These metal-rich deposits ranging from chimney to pancake-like are deeply formed in the circulating seawater from the underlying rocks and issue out to the cold seafloor along the major fractures. So these are also the other minerals which are coming up for us. The world's oceans, with a total volume of more than 500 million cubic kilometers, hold more than 97% of all the water on the earth. However, the 3.5% salt content of this water makes it unusable for most human needs. So what are the recent issues? Now, in UPSC, these are very important. What are the recent issues and development with regards to oceanography? This is UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982, also known as the Law of the Sea, divides the marine areas into five main zones called as the internal waters, territorial sea, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, and high seas. This is a very important declaration which you have to remember. It is the only international convention which stipulates a framework for state jurisdiction in maritime spaces. It provides a different legal status to the different maritime zones. That means how much of minerals you can take from your oceans. Like for example, we have Indian Ocean. Now they will restrict how much India can take or how many minerals can it take, to what extent it can take, not the entire ocean. Only a certain extent only it will take. So it will be deciding the jurisdiction as to till where India will have can exploit the resources in the Indian Ocean. It provides a backbone for offshore governance by coastal states and those navigating the oceans. It not only zones coastal states offshore areas, but also provides specific guidance for states' rights and responsibilities in the 5 concentric zones. That means in these 5 zones, it is the responsibility of the UNCLOS, and whatever law they make, every country have to follow this. They cannot go beyond the law. So it is like the United Nations, how it will be specifying for the countries. The UNCLOS is also providing the sea waters. Internal waters are waters on the landward side of the baseline from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. Each coastal state has full sovereignty over its internal water as like its land territory. Example are bays, ports, inlets, rivers, and even lakes that are connected to the sea. Within your state, whatever is there, you will have control, like how you have control over your land. There is no right of innocent passage to the internal water. There is no right as such. The innocent passage refers to the passing through the waters which are not prejudicial to peace and security. However, the nations have the right to suspend the same. It's up to you whether you want to stop it or not. Like for example, if any ship of any other country enters our water, we have every right to take over the ship, because you cannot enter the waters. How you have no space zone? You all know that. Why do they shoot down the jets when they are flowing? Because that is called as a no flying zone. That is our zone. Any other plane, if it has to enter, it has to have the permission. Same way, if a ship has to enter into a sea, it should have the permission. So it all depends upon the state's rights, how do they do it. The territorial sea extends up to 12 nautical miles from its baselines. A nautical mile is based on the circumference of the earth and is equal to 1 minute of the latitude. It is slightly more than a land measured mile. 1 nautical mile is equal to 1.150 land miles or 1.85 kilometers. The coastal states have sovereignty and jurisdiction over the territorial sea. These rights extend not only on the surface but also to the seabed, subsoil, and even the airspace also. Just now I told you that every state has its own right. You have to take the permission to enter into the sea waters or the airspace as such. Then what is a contiguous zone is that it extends seaward up to 24 nautical miles from its baselines. It is an intermediary zone between the territorial sea and the high seas. The coastal state has a right to prevent and punish infringement of fiscal, immigration, sanitary, and custom laws within its territory and territorial sea. You must have heard about smuggling. That comes under this only. You cannot enter and you cannot take, or you cannot conduct any business. Unlike the territorial sea, the contiguous zone only gives jurisdiction to the state on ocean, surface, and floor. It does not provide air and space rights. What is an exclusive economic zone? Each coastal state